Welcome to the WORKOLOGY podcast, a podcast for the disruptive workplace leader. Join host Jessica Miller-Merrill, founder of WORKOLOGY.com, as she sits down and gets to the bottom of trends, tools, and case studies for the business leader, HR, and recruiting professional who is tired of the status quo. Now here's Jessica with this episode of WORKOLOGY.
Welcome to the WORKOLOGY podcast, sponsored by Clear Company. At a time when the unemployment rate is 3.8%, SHRM says that more than 7.8 million jobs will need to be filled by 2020. You probably are feeling that. SHRM doesn't need to tell us. There's a lot of jobs and not a lot of people to fill those roles. As HR leaders, we're always looking for talent pools to tap into for new candidates. This includes campaigns to specifically recruit diverse candidates, like persons with disabilities and other marginalized groups. One often overlooked group includes people who have a criminal history. With nearly 700,000, that's 700,000 people being released from jail or prison every single year, employers need to be open, or they should be open, to hiring the formerly incarcerated. You'll find out why here in a second. Technology specialist and restorative justice activist Shelley wants to educate the public about the benefits of hiring the formerly incarcerated. I want you to listen to Shelley's story. It is amazing. Shelley, welcome to the WORKOLOGY podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me today.
So we're going to link to your TED Talk in the transcript of this podcast over on WORKOLOGY. And I will say that your TEDx talk was breathtakingly honest, and it really had a powerful message. You begin with, what if you were only known for the worst thing you've ever done, and how does that make you feel? You talk about believing in you and completely destroying your life. I mean, it's amazing. I love your story. Can you maybe talk a little bit for folks who haven't listened or watched the TEDx talk yet, and share what led you to that point in your life and what it was like standing in front of the judge?
Yeah, so statistics say that 70% of children who have a parent who is incarcerated end up following in their footsteps. And my father, unfortunately, was in and out of prison most of my life for drugs and alcohol. From the time I can remember, he was, it was such an influence in our lives. He got me drunk for the first time at the age of 11. And when I lived with him in high school, he told me that one of the rules of the house was to, that if I ever wanted to do drugs or try drugs, that I had to bring them home and share them with him. And, he had people selling drugs in and out of our house, or coming in and out of our house as he was selling drugs to them. And it just seemed like he would get out, and he'd literally be out for like a week, and then he'd end up right back in prison. And this went on for about, 20 plus years of dealing with this. And I'm not saying that my dad has everything to do with the path that I took, but it definitely was a big influence. I didn't have positive role models that were telling me, you can do it. And, I didn't have money to go to college, and both my parents were teens when they had me. And they were kids having a kid. And, so I didn't have the best upbringing. And so therefore, the decisions that I made, I chose to hang out with the wrong type of people, and I got involved in drugs, and I became an addict. And later on, started selling drugs to support my habit. And that's how I ended up in front of the judge. I was bringing drugs across state lines, and the federal government found out, once you start bringing drugs across state lines, it becomes a federal thing. So they indicted me. And what's crazy is that I sold 52 grams of meth and to a confidential informant. And so if you sell 1 to 50 grams, it's 5 years. If you sell 50 or more, 50 to 500 grams, you fall into the 10-year mandatory minimum guideline sentencing guideline. And so I was literally looking at 10 years for selling 52 grams of meth. Whew, so it was pretty crazy. But that's how I ended up there. That's how I ended up standing in front of that judge that day.
Wow.
Yeah.
How old were you when this all happened?
I was 36 or 37. Yeah. Yeah. I think I was 30. Maybe I was 30, 36. Yeah, I must have been 36, 35. Maybe it was 35, 36. It's hard to, my brain doesn't work well with exact
Like,
numbers and dates. Yeah.
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 So you weren't a kid. You were an adult.
Yeah. Yeah, I was. But I had been battling with addiction. So I started using drugs, experimenting with drugs in high school. First it was weed, then meth, but I wasn't like a full blown addict where I was dependent upon it, had to have it every day situation until I got into my 20s. And then I started using heavily, probably at the age of 24. And then, up until the date of my arrest.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what you're doing now, right? So that was then. How long did you serve? And then what are you doing right now? Like, what's your job?
So I served, the judge was, thank God, he was supposed to sentence me to the 10 years. I signed for the 10 years, but because I didn't have an extensive criminal past, he gave me a 4-year sentence. So so I ended up, I had a 4-year sentence, and I got 10 months off for good time. I got 10 months to do like the remainder of my sentence in a halfway house to help reintegrate me into society. And then if I did this drug treatment program called RDAP, and I completed it successfully, then they would take an additional year off my sentence. So altogether, I did about 1.5 years in a federal prison. So my job now, I work for an international tech firm, one of the biggest companies in the world. And I am a surface specialist. So what I do is I sell our computers to enterprise customers. So it's basically B2B sales.
Cool. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I thought it was good for people to understand the context, like, fully, and like,
Yeah.
why this a personal story, like it's a personal importance to you. And in the talk, you mentioned that 76% of people released from prison will reoffend and return to prison. This is a really common thing. Why do you think this wasn't the case for you? Like, you got out, you went to the halfway house. What was the key to getting you rehabilitated back into the world and getting that skills training or that work after being incarcerated?
Yeah. So, okay. So 76% of people reoffend and return to prison because the number one reason is a lack of stable employment. And when I was in prison, my number one goal, I thought, okay, I have to go to prison. I can either complain and moan about it, or I can look at the positives of it. And then I can work towards, changing my life. So from the first day I stepped onto the prison yard, I enrolled in every single rehabilitative program that I possibly could, and I spent my whole entire time working on becoming a better person by taking a multitude of classes and programs: drug treatment, anger management, forgiveness. I have a stack of certificates, that I hold on to that are near and dear to me because it's my proof to the world that I've been rehabilitated. And, I learned a lot about myself, and I wanted to change because right after my arrest, I found out something very, I found out something that was life-changing for me, but that's what made me want to change my life. And also God, I knew, I believe in the Lord, and I'm a spiritual person, and I knew I needed to get right with him, and that he was going to help me change from this angry, negative person, so that I could be a better person.
Let's talk about that life-changing thing that happened. Share with us.
Sure. Yeah. What happened right after my arrest, I found out I was pregnant. And I honestly never thought I was going to have children. It wasn't planned. And I just thought, okay, well, I'm having a baby. I'm looking at 10 years. But, I know with God on my side, who knows, I know that whatever's going to happen is going to be for the best. And I want to be a better person for my son. If I don't change my life, then I'm going to be the same kind of parent to him that my father was to me. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to give my son a better chance. I didn't want him to fall into that 70%, statistics, follow in my footsteps. So I changed my life. Like I said, I did all those programs, and those programs, after learning, so you don't know what you don't know. And then once you learn a new way, it's like this light bulb goes on in your brain, and it's like that aha moment where you finally understand. And that's really what happened with me. Once I had that knowledge, it was like, I'm never going back. I'm going to continue on this path. It feels good to be this person that I am today. The person that I was before was narrow-minded, was negative, was angry, was addicted to drugs, was living in bondage. But today I don't think that way. I don't feel that way. I can't, I will never touch drugs again. That's how strongly I feel about it. And I have no desire to touch drugs ever again. And I have rational thinking skills that I never had before. I have an open mind to things. I look at things from a positive perspective instead of a negative perspective. And I noticed that my life has completely changed because of that. And all these breakthroughs are now happening in my life, and especially in such a short amount of time. So that's how I found my job and got hired. I have a great career. That is how I was able to get on a TED Talk stage and share my story. That's how I've been able to get on multiple stages and share my story, because I've changed my mindset. And I'm excited about life as before I wasn't. It's just so freeing. And when you change your mindset, you change your life. And that's really, that's how I was able to break through and break past these barriers. And plus, I learned to not give up when faced with fear. That was another thing I learned in those programs, that they taught me. One of the programs I did was called Defy Ventures, and it taught me that, when you get out, you're going to face society stigma. You're going to be rejected. And the number one thing that you cannot do is buy into those stigmas, and you can't let that rejection hold you back. You have to keep fighting, and you have to keep pressing forward. And eventually someone will say yes. So when I applied for my position that I have now, I was actually, I was hired right after the interview. And then they found out I had a criminal record, and they rescinded their job offer from me. And instead of giving up and just tucking my tail in between my leg, I fought them, and I battled them. I went toe to toe, and I said, no, that's not right. I have turned my life around. Yeah, I made some mistakes, but that's not who I am today. And here's everything I've done to change my life. And here's why you should hire me. And I'm so glad that I did, because, now I've been with this company for 2 years, and I'm doing great. I love it here. But I can only imagine like how many people have been turned down, and because they wouldn't fight, they wouldn't put up that fight. They just, bought into the stigma. They felt that rejection, and they just went back to what they did before. And that's why people go back to prison, because they can't get a second chance.
I want listeners to understand, because not only did you fight for your job, but you took the job and you were hired as a product service advisor. And then within 2 months of your start date, you were named an MVP, which is amazing. And so I think this is important for HR and recruiting people listening to hear that, yes, you had a criminal past, but you are excelling at your job now, and you were recognized for your good work, your excellent work in your job at the company?
I think one of the main reasons for that is because I was so grateful. When they came back and they said, okay, we're going to give you a second chance, I knew that my life, the trajectory of my life was going to change dramatically. And that this was the opportunity that I had to run with it. This door was opened. I had to run with this. And I had to really give it my all. I came to work every day, and I felt so blessed to be there. While other people were complaining about their job and having to do this and, have to do that. And, for me, I'm like, what are you talking about? This is amazing. Like, I'm glad I get to deal with this, and it's crazy because they could have told me to do anything and I would have done it with a smile. I couldn't see why people were complaining about things. To me, it wasn't just a job. It was the opportunity that changed my life. I know that a lot of people who are formerly incarcerated have the same type of mindset because they know that the odds are stacked against them in the workforce. And when they get that opportunity, we're so grateful for it. And so, my attitude at work was that of being grateful and, moldable and humble. And, I quickly, management saw that. And I just was very driven and passionate about being there too, on top of it all.
Can you talk a little bit about Code Tenderloin and other organizations, like what they do and maybe how we as HR and recruiting leaders can support them?
Yeah. So Code Tenderloin is a job readiness training program. It's two parts. The first part is the job readiness training program. So they do they teach you how to write a great resume that most of the time it will help, get the interview. But then after you get the interview, they teach you how to interview. So because that's definitely something you need to prep for that a lot of people don't realize how important it is. And so they do that. And then if you continue on with them, you can do the second phase, which is a coding. It's called Code Ramp. And what it does is it basically ramps you up to ramps up your coding skills so that you can get into a boot camp. And then hopefully their goal is you get into the boot camp and then you graduate and you get an amazing tech job. They do this for underserved communities. So they do it for people who have criminal records, or they do it for people who are homeless, or they do it for people who just have been having a hard time finding work. And they really try to help you get the skills necessary to find employment. So it's really an incredible program. They need to be worldwide.
Well, we're gonna link to them so that HR folks and recruiting folks that are listening to the podcast Code Tenderloin can learn more about it and find some ways to get involved. Let's take a reset. This is Jessica Miller Merrill, and you are listening to the Workology podcast, sponsored by my friends at Clear Company. Today, we are talking with Shelley Winner after she drastically changed her circumstances after incarceration, and why we shouldn't be reluctant as employers to hire candidates with criminal histories.
This podcast is sponsored by Clear Company, the fastest growing talent management system on the market, and recently won G2 Crowd's #1 user recommended Winter 2018 award. Visit clearcompany.com to learn more.
I do want to talk a little bit about the laws. The laws are changing right now, and they're becoming more in favor of second chances. And your story, I feel like, is such a great example of why we should rethink these things. Right now, there are 23 states and Washington, D.C. that have banned private or public employers from asking prospective employees if they have a criminal history until after they passed an initial screening. Maybe they've had an interview or they've been given a conditional job offer. I want to hear from you as someone who has been through this experience and in your work as an advocate. What can HR people do more of to help change this? Like, how can they get involved? Because it's not just banning a box or waiting until after post offer to ask for these things? Like, what are some ways that HR can help drive this change so we can have more success stories like you out there?
They need to change the hiring policies with the companies. 56% of companies in America will not hire somebody with a criminal record. And I don't know if it's written in their policy or if it's just something that they just don't want to do. But they need to be more open to that. You know, if a candidate applies that has a criminal record, I know that they can't ask. They're not allowed to ask that. And so what ends up happening is they get the offer and then they do the background check. They get put up on this pedestal, like, you know, where they're thinking, oh my God, I got this job. This is amazing. And then they fill out the background check and that job offer gets rescinded. So really the Ban the Box initiative, it's not really helping as much as it should, because what it does is it pushes that process of rejection further down the line. So you end up getting rejected anyways, but it's even harder the second or later down the road, because you've already gotten the job offer and you've told your friends, you've told your family, you're excited and you have hope, you know, and then it's just taken away from you. So what I think companies need to do is they just need to be open to, you know, if the background check comes back and it's flagged, before they just automatically rescind that job offer, talk to that person, because at that point you already know they have a record, so you can ask them about it. And then ask them what they've done to, you know, change their life, how they've become rehabilitated, and focus on those things. You know, focus on their skills, focus on what they've done to change their life. And obviously this person, whoever has applied, and, you know, if they got the job offer, then they're a good candidate. So maybe they, you know, giving them a chance is what should be done. Because I don't think anybody would want to be rejected for a mistake that they've made in their life, you know, because we all make mistakes.
What advice do you have for other folks like you? We're talking to job seekers now, people who have maybe something in their background, in their past, and they're looking for a job. Like, how can they overcome and move forward with their lives and have a story like yours?
They have to be resilient. They have to get back up on their feet every time they are knocked down. They have to. I mean, they don't have a choice, because they are going to get knocked down. It's just part of the process, you know, and until people start changing their mindset, which I believe will happen. It's slow but surely. I believe that the more people are educated about this, the more the mindset will shift, and people will start being more open to hiring people with a record. But until then, they need to fight. They need to get back up, and they should challenge. If they really want that job, they should challenge the company. Typically what happens when you get rejected from the background check, you have 3 to 5 days by law to respond and, you know, give your side of the story. Most people, once they get that rejection, they just give up. They don't respond within those 3 to 5 days. And I think that's important, that people need to respond and, you know, let these companies know about what happened. And then those companies should take that into consideration. You know, I'd say just standing up for your right, responding to the background check. And if you have resources in the city you live in, check and see if you have the Fair Chance Ordinance, because they will help back you. And if you do, reach out to them if you're not getting anywhere and see if they'll help you.
You're out here, you're evangelizing, you have the TED Talk, you're sharing your story. Well, what's next? What are you working on next to help further maybe bring attention to hiring people with criminal histories?
Yeah, so it's funny you asked that. I just got an offer from a lady, a publishing house. They want to work with me to write a book.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I haven't responded to her yet, but I just continue to keep, I'm going to continue to keep sharing my story of someone wants to give me the platform to get up and share my story, I'm going to take it. I believe that the more people that hear this message, the more change that it can bring about. And I was talking with another guy in London, and I might possibly go out to London to speak at a recruiter event. I'm just going to continue to share my story and be a voice for the voiceless. I have to.
I love it. Well, Shelley, where can people go to learn more about you and what you're doing?
So I'm currently working on my website right now. All that I have up for my website for the moment, because things have been so crazy, is just a place where you can fill in your contact information and, send me your information. And if you want to get involved, because I've started a program where I want to work with any company, for that fact, that would be willing to start a training program for any of these positions that they have a hard time filling. And we could start a training program for that, write some curriculum, and then place it inside of the prison. I have the relationship with the prisons, and that's not a problem getting the program in the prison. It's the problem is getting companies to put up the money to get the curriculum and then, get it into the prison. But I want to do that, and I want to get these inmates trained up, and when they're ready to be released, if they do well in the training program and they pass the video interview, because they have video chat in prison, they can, and if everything goes well, then they can move straight into a job as soon as they're released. I just want them to go straight from prison to work. I don't want them to have to get out. I don't want them to have to struggle. I want them to have the skills necessary for the job that they're going to go, move in, that position they're going to move into. And I want them to have hope and be confident.
We'll link to your website in the transcript of this podcast, and they can keep up with you. And then let's circle back and hear more about what happens next. I love the work that you're doing. I think it's changing people's lives.
Yes, thank you. And then the website is winnerscircleus.com. So if anybody just wants to click on that and send me their information if they want to get involved, I have a ton of resources. I can I love to help and connect people, make connections, and if somebody wants to start a training program, they can send me their information and we can work something out.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Empathy in the hiring process is imperative to keep the human in human resources. We all make mistakes. I have made my share of mistakes. I will continue to make mistakes. We are learning and growing. We may have broken the law, but avoided incarceration. As Shelley said in the beginning of her TEDx talk, would you want the worst thing you've ever done to define you for the rest of your life? Think about the worst thing that I've ever done, and no, I do not want that to define me for the rest of my life. Second chances aren't just something that we talk about. We must understand how to support rehabilitation and education for people who are currently or formerly incarcerated. A second chance changed Shelley's life. Consider the impact we could make as a community if we offered the same to the 700,000 people being released from the prison system every single year. Shelley, thank you for your candor and your work in restorative justice. Thank you for joining the Workology podcast, sponsored by Clear Company. This podcast is for the disruptive workplace leader who's tired of the status quo. This is Jessica Miller Merrill. Until next time, visit workology.com to listen to all our previous podcast episodes.